Hi, my name is Jeanette. This is the first time I'm doing a video clip, so I hope I do okay with it. And I hope you don't mind, but I'm gonna read what I want to say, only because I think I'm gonna get flustered and lose my track if I don't, so I hope that's alright. So I work as a social worker in Cambridge, and I want to start by saying that I'm quite an ordinary person. Most of the time, nothing unusual goes on for me. I'm not especially sensitive or perceptive, and I'm certainly not particularly spiritually advanced. So if such experiences can happen to me, they really can happen to anyone. I want to put something on for this campaign because I think it's really important that we break through the way that we're taught to see ourselves in the world, and what we understand as normal. We need to open up to the full range of experiences that we can have, and learn how to hold them in a way that is supportive and keeps us safe, because they can be quite overwhelming. But that means that we don't close ourselves down. I don't really fully understand at all what those experiences all mean, but I know that they're deeply meaningful for us when we have them, and it's important to support each other in accepting them as significant, and making sense of them, our own sense. We have to come to our own conclusions about what they mean for us. My worry is that often certain kinds of experiences are seen as signs that there's something wrong with us. You know, we're unwell in some way, we have to be treated, and anything to stop the experiences from happening. So I'm not saying that some of us sometimes don't need support to manage and integrate what is happening, but I think it's important we don't suppress what's coming up for us, which would mean losing a really valuable opportunity for learning and growth. So I'm going to tell you a bit about my journey as just one example, and again, everybody's journey, everybody's experiences, everybody's learning is unique to them, and it's all equally valuable. So from when I was a child, I always longed to know that there was something more. I was told that the material world, what we can see and touch, that's what reality was, and we could have faith in something beyond that, but that was all we could have, and that just wasn't enough for me. I read books, I tried meditation, I went to lots of workshops, but I never got beyond the pain of not knowing, which at times was really more like a kind of despair. So I trained as a social worker in my 40s, and of course I found that social work training is based on the same model of reality. It draws on medical, psychological and social ways of understanding the world, and doesn't really deal with the spiritual at all. But I had come across other complementary perspectives, and I ended up talking with people who had had experiences of what have been called non-ordinary states of consciousness, and basically they were experiencing things that didn't fit with the materialist world. So those experiences weren't always easy. In fact, they were often quite difficult and frightening. And some people asked for help from their doctor, or sometimes they had medical help imposed on them. Some even ended up in hospital, like Erica, who's done another one of these clips. And others had kept quiet, but had still struggled with things. Some had come out feeling better, and they were okay with what they'd lived through, but others were still struggling and having difficult times. I'd been reading about ways of entering non-ordinary states, and one of these was holotropic breathwork, which was developed by a psychiatrist called Stan Grof. I went to a couple of workshops of holotropic breathwork, which had a huge impact on me. The first session I inwardly saw shapes and images which felt deeply meaningful, although I didn't have a clue what they meant. And at other times during these sessions, energy flowed through my body, which I was told later was probably Kundalini, which can also come up through meditation practice. So I had a sense of my heart opening, and I felt I had finally found a way of connecting or reaching out to that something more. I was so bowled over by this that I ended up training as a holotropic breathwork facilitator, and I tried other techniques of entering non-ordinary states like meditation and work with entheogens like ayahuasca and psilocybin. Most of this work, some of the experiences were ecstatic and some of them were absolutely terrifying. So most of this work, thankfully, I did during a year away from work, which I could pay for from an inheritance. There were times I felt so shattered that I thought I would never work again. I felt like an amoeba on the floor, like I had no boundaries left. Afterwards, at times, I felt scared because I thought, well, okay, I'm in my normal state of consciousness, but what if these other levels are still there? And if there are things in there that could be dangerous? I didn't know. Thankfully, my last experience was of being without a body, dissolved in and part of a field of consciousness, light, wisdom, love and deep compassion. And to my amazement, because I'd read things about Taoism and I thought, perhaps there was a field of something, but I felt that we were it was impersonal. But I felt in this experience that I was, and we are all, personally and deeply known and accepted and loved. I still went through months of asking myself whether what I'd seen, and in particular the scary things, was real or not. And in the end I had to just let that go, because I concluded I can't ever know, but it certainly was very real for me. So the experience of merging with that sea of consciousness has really changed my life, the way I see myself and the world. And although, of course, I don't know what happens when we die, it took away my fear of death. What I learned, and again, this is just my experience, my understanding, and everybody has to find their own understandings. What I learned was that the everyday material level of reality that we can see and touch is only one of many levels of reality, of an expression of a deeper reality in which we and everything that exists are one. Somehow everything that exists, including us, is part of the evolution of that consciousness within itself. Again, it's just what it looked like to me. And so it seems to me that we can move between sensing these different levels of reality, and a bit like switching channels on a television, but they're all levels of the same thing. So to fast forward to today, I did go back to work at the end of my year out, and that was fine. Though I went off with stress for a bit after working in a mental health it was an acute mental health team, which maybe looking back on it was not the most sensible first job while I was still trying to make sense of these experiences. And I'm still working as a social worker now, so I actually mostly don't meditate, and I don't use any of these techniques to open myself up to these other levels, because I just think that would be too difficult alongside my day job. So I do at times still have spontaneous episodes of Kundalini coming up, and through that entries into non-ordinary states of consciousness. Sometimes that's triggered by an emotional shock, like when a close friend of mine, colleague and friend, committed suicide. These times last up to a couple of months, and they usually gradually build and then taper off again, and they happen mostly at night, waking me in the early hours. Thankfully I can always pull myself out of it when I have to, like when I have to get up to go to work, or when they do happen during the day, which can happen. Some of the experiences are blissful and others are frightening, and when the energy comes through, that can be physically quite demanding. The times when I'm in these states seem more real than normal. They have a particular really intense and vivid quality, but when I'm not in them, they seem quite distant, and I find it difficult to connect with them or almost remember what it was like. They can be both energizing and exhausting. So I found what I learned from my holotropic breathwork training and from reading about mystical experiences, Jung's psychology and the notion of the shadow really helpful to reassure myself when I get frightened, which many times I've been, that what I'm going through is a process I can trust, and that it will ultimately be integrating and healing. It also helps to know I'm not alone going through it, even though I know everybody goes through different experiences. It feels like we're all in this journey together. And having friends who weren't frightened of the material that was coming up for me was hugely important. So, of course, I've always been a bit careful about who I share this journey with, both to not frighten people, but also not get labelled with having mental health problems. But this campaign feels important, and I can't stand by without supporting it. I'm deeply grateful for what I've experienced and what I've been given, and I feel a responsibility to give something back by sharing this with you. I really think there are many of us who have experiences which may be incomprehensible at the time they happen, but which contain the possibility of deep transformational learning. They can help us go beyond the limited ways we have been taught to experience ourselves and the world. These breakthroughs can be very painful or destabilizing, and we may need support and understanding to go through them. But it is so important that we don't block the process of inner healing and growth for us as individuals and for all of us collectively. So I support this campaign, and I hope as more of us find the courage to speak out about our experiences, together we can make a difference and help others not be afraid of us as somehow abnormal or unwell, and our experiences as something to be medicated away or fixed in some other way. We have to discover ourselves as part of a wisdom that reaches beyond our modern Western worldview, and part of a love that binds all of us and is deeply healing for us and for our society. Our world and our survival may actually depend on it. Thank you. Thanks.